Hello, welcome to lab number 3, which is your first desktop flow. We're going to get stuck into Power Automate Desktop here. So let's kick into it. What we'll see here is, before we begin, let's just go through a couple of things. The lab document we're going to work on is lab number 3. You'll create your first Power Automate Desktop flow. If you are not sure where these labs are, there is a zip file in the resources section. Please go to that and you can download the zip file, which is called this, and then here are when you extract the zip, you'll have all of these PDFs and all the data that you'll need to complete the labs. That's the last reminder I'm going to give of that. Obviously, you should have your tenant set up correctly. This is the last time I'll remind you on that one. For all the labs moving forward, you need to have your tenant set up correctly, Power Automate Desktop installed, and your zip file extracted. As with all these labs, there is support available for you in the chat bubble in the bottom right hand corner. You can follow along with me and pause the video as you need to, or skip around the video as much as you like, obviously. Or you can download the lab document and step through yourself in your own time. That's totally fine as well. As I say, we are just going to step through this lab number 3 on screen here, and you can click along with me. So without further ado, here we go. We're going to open up Power Automate Desktop. So there should be a link on your desktop or somewhere around that. Oh, we've got an update. So I'm going to update this just because it's good practice. So I'm clicking update and come back to you in a second. Okay, so Power Automate Desktop has been updated, and here we are ready to go. So what we're going to do is make sure if you've installed this, make sure that you have signed into your tenant that you set up to work with. Make sure you're logged into that, and you're not logged into like your work environment or anything like that. So I'm just going to click in here and go to our development environment here. Here's some flows I've already created. I'm going to create a new one here. So let's go ahead and create a new flow. And we're going to call this, in fact, let's just create a test one, just to have a look around the user interface. Just call this test and just hit create, and I'll show you around the interface. So what will happen is when you click on that new flow, you will see Power Automate Desktop will pop up with an empty window. Sometimes it will hide itself down here, so you have to click in here to find it, but you can see there it's opening itself there. Let's have a quick walk around this interface. So you have the toolbar, which is across the top here. Let's maximize it. So you have the toolbar across the top, where you've got things like save, run, stop, run the very next action. You have a web recorder that we'll be working with in lab number 9, and you have the desktop recorder that we will work with very shortly. You can also have edit for cut, copy, paste, all of that sort of thing as well, and different menu options up here. You have the ability to create subflows. So this here is your main flow. This will be, so when you hit on run, everything in the main window will be executed. But then you can have these subflows. If I create a new subflow here, I'll just call it subflow 1. And that's a whole bunch of actions that are separate to main, which help with sort of modularizing code and making it easier to follow and read. I often put error handlers in a subflow and things like that. So subflows, we'll be doing those in lab number 9. The actions pane here is where you have all the different actions that you can do in Power Automate Desktop, and there is a search actions box up here as well. I use a search actions all the time because you'll notice here that these are not alphabetical. They're in almost like a use order. But you just have a click around here, pause and have a look around at some of these. What you can do with things like email servers or Outlook, user interface automation, for in Windows. These are all the things you can do in the Windows automation. Work with zips, files, folders, all this kind of stuff. Have a look around in here. It's pretty interesting. We'll be using some of these obviously during today. Over on the right hand side, so this is on the left hand side with all the actions. On the right hand side over here, you have actually 3 areas. There are 3 areas here. The first is variables. Oops, click on that to open it. So if you lose it, you can just click on there to get it back. So this is the variables pane. This is where you can store input and output variables. In our lab later today, the next lab after this, we will create some input and output variables. And flow variables, this is where, as you're creating things inside here, if any action generates a variable, they will show in here. So it's all in one spot. This next pane here, the 3 layers here, this is where as we are creating flows and recording the user interface, it's capturing different elements of the user interface. So UI elements stands for user interface elements. And as you're recording those elements, you will see them appear in this UI elements pane, all in the one area. And we'll work with that today as well. Similar with images, you can record images, capture images on screen, and all of images will be stored in this centralized location that make it easy to follow and easy to find everything. So that's a quick walkthrough of the user interface. So let's just close out of this. We'll not save that, we don't need to keep that. I'm going to create a new flow now, and this time we're going to call this, in fact, let me show you, actually, there's another way of actually opening flows. So let's keep that minimized, and let's go to flow.microsoft.com. Flow.microsoft.com. If it's so, flow.microsoft.com will take you to your localized area. There is another way of doing this. You go to create, and you can actually create a desktop flow from here. So click on here, desktop flow. You can also go into my flows and new flow, desktop flow. So either of those buttons will do this. And now what we're going to do is we're going to call this enter an invoice, and then launch app. And now this will ask to allow to open Power Automate Desktop. Tick that if you like. I'm going to leave it off just so I show that each time we do that, and then click open. Now that's just showing that there are different ways of doing the same thing. If I was to do a new flow here, that would do the same thing, it's just different ways of doing it depending on what you prefer. So here's our flow that's opening up. This is the enter an invoice flow. And now we're going to build out our workflow. So just following in the labs around now, so from page number 6 onwards, all of these steps I'm literally just following the lab document. If you would like to click along, please do. If you'd like to do it yourself, feel free to pause and do it in your own time. So first thing we're going to do is going to open up what we are automating here is you'll have seen it in the demo in the earlier sections. We're automating the user interface and entering data into that Contoso app, the Contoso invoicing app. So what we're going to do is we are going to first of all launch that application. So there is inside the system area, there is a run application action. So I'm just going to click on that and drag it over into the main window. And what this is doing now, it's saying, okay, which application do you want to run? Which application do you want to run? So we're going to click on this application path to select a file, and then browse to, now if you've installed this with the default settings for the Contoso invoicing app, it will be in C, Program Files, Contoso Inc., Contoso Invoicing, and then Legacy Invoicing App. So browse to that location and you should have, it should look something like that. There are no command line arguments, but that's where you would enter them if there were any. You can set a working folder for this to execute in. We're just going to leave that blank, and everything else just leave as it is. Click on save. So now what we're going to do is we're going to record ourselves using the Contoso invoicing app. So what we need to do is need to open up the application to start with. So what this part of the flow is doing is it's opening the application. So we're going to open the application so that the application is there, because we're going to use the desktop recorder. So if we go to so now what we're going to do is we're going to use the desktop recorder. So make sure you open up the Contoso invoicing app, because we are going to record ourselves doing it. Now 2 tips here. First of all, make sure that you are familiar with the process that we're going to record. So it's the same process that we did in Process Advisor. But if you're not familiar with that, then I'll run through it quickly now, so you can get an idea of what we're going to do. Make sure you've practiced it a couple of times before you do the record. That's tip number 1. Tip number 2, if you're using 2 screens and you've got the lab inside the same screen that you are going to do the recording on, don't do that. Move the lab document over to a second screen if you can, because the lab document might get in the way of your recording. If you're clicking through the lab here, or even this video, if you've got this video on the same screen as where you're doing the recording, and you're going to be pausing and that kind of thing, then the desktop recorder will record you hitting pause. So just make sure that you've got that covered. If you do record any extraneous actions, you can delete them. That's pretty easy. So make sure you're familiar with the process. So just to run through the process before we record it, what we're going to do, the app launches in this state here. So we'll be going to Invoices, New Invoice. We're putting some data in here. Be anything you like. And then hitting save. That's what we're recording, that particular process, okay? So close it, reset it by opening up the app. This is where the app will be once it's launched. So we need to record everything from that point forward, including moving to invoices. What I find is people practice and they don't reset it down to accounts and miss out the step of clicking on invoices. So there are 2 recorders here. There's a web recorder and a desktop recorder. We're going to use the desktop recorder and click on that. Power Automate Desktop will minimize, and you'll get the same recorder screen that if you've done the Process Advisor lab, this is the same recorder that we used there. So I'm going to hit on record, and you'll see that as I'm hovering over these different areas, a little red box will appear around them. So we're going to go to Invoices, and you'll see it on the right hand side. It is recording, new record, account, Inc, and then a number, and then change this to invoiced, hit save, and that's it, and then finish. Now once you hit finish, so you may have to do that a couple of times. On the recording, on the pane, there's a little bin icon if you record something extraneous. There is a reset button. So if you record something out of whack, then you can hit the reset button here, and that will just reset things. I get a question often, what does image recording mean? So how the desktop recorder works is it actually uses accessibility features. So the same functionality that describes a user interface to a partially sighted person, button save, button new, that kind of thing. It's the accessibility features are what drives the little red squares. Some really old apps don't have those features built in, or sometimes you need to record the image. So we're currently automating the identifier of the accessibility feature. If it doesn't have accessibility, then the way the recording works is it actually takes a snapshot of the image of where the mouse is actually clicking. So if I click on record here and I go to here, you see there's no red square. And what it's doing this time is it's just recording the image, the images. Which images aren't that great to record. Yep, I don't want to save them. So that's just what the image. It just means it's recording the image of where the mouse is clicking, rather than using the accessibility features. So what you'll notice is when we were we've got this comment that's generated here. This is the start of the actions using a recorder, and this is the end of the actions using the recorder. And then everything else here. This is what we were clicking on. It's just recorded the actions and built the corresponding actions from here. It's automatically populated them in this flow. Pretty cool. So we're not going to record closing the app. We're doing that just for simplicity. Of course, in the real world, you would have a close application down here as well. So just remember that as you test it and run this, so if I hit on run now, you'll see that happen. So click on the run icon, you'll see it open up the application, and it will go to there, new, start typing. Pretty neat. So what you'll notice is that you can click on save. So we saved the flow, and you'll notice that I actually missed something out. I missed saving. So if I go and close this and then reopen it, you'll notice that the marge items are not there because I didn't actually save it. Didn't actually click this save button. So what happens if you did miss? Now this is quite common in our workshops, so it's a good thing to go through here. What we want to do is create an action that is clicking this element here. So the way that we can do that is if we go over here to actions and we're going to click UI element. Click UI element in a window. So drag that over. And then you'll get the pop-up appear. That's okay, which UI element do you want to click? And you click on this down arrow, and here are all the available UI elements, but the one that I want isn't actually there. So we're going to add a new UI element. We're going to add one. So click on add, and what will happen is it will minimize, and it will open up this user interface, and our friend, the little red box, appears again. But notice here, now this is called a tracking session, so it's tracking what I'm doing, but I want to add this particular UI element here. Now notice what it says here, press Control and left to add it here. So if I just click it, it's not going to do anything. It's assuming that what I'm doing is I'm just sort of clicking around to find the element that I want. But what I'm going to do is click on there, and then so make sure that I've got the right thing, which is the save changes, which is correct, and then hold down Control and left click. And you'll see there that it appears now. It appears here. Click on done. And it's a left click we want to do. Here's all the different actions you could do where we want to do a left click and then click on save. So now I'm going to do that again. Hit on, let's close the application this time. Hit on run. And we should see it save the new record as well as data input it. So here it is launching the application, clicking around as it needs to. This is doing the recorded actions. And then that final step is the one that we recorded, and now that has saved it. Cool. A couple other things to note on here is you can, if you wanted to edit a particular action, you can click on the ellipsis to edit, or double click will open it up as well. If you want to rename these UI elements, now it is best practice to do this for all the live projects that I work on. I've got a naming convention that I use for these. Sometimes it is good to rename them. You don't have to in this environment. I just want to show you how you can do that. So first press F2, and I would call this UI invoices. Here is F2. I call that a button, and it is new. Again here I would go F2, and you get the idea there of renaming these so they make more sense. The other tip is, as you're going through these, as you're developing things, you might record something and it doesn't work, or you might record something and change your mind about using that particular element. There is this handy little in the ellipsis here, there's this remove unused UI elements. So something I do regularly during the development of these things, I will be recording myself doing the work. I'll test it, see if it works. If it doesn't, I'll try something different until I finally get it right. Then what I'll do is, once I've done a particular section of the work, I'll go in here, I'll remove unused UI elements, and then I will go through and rename what's left to be meaningful. That's how I prefer to work. So that is the, hopefully you picked up some good stuff in that. That is the end of lab number 3. Thank you for watching, thank you for clicking along, and we'll see you in the next lab.